I was standing in my driveway, staring at a crisp white envelope taped to my front door. The bold red letters screamed "Final Notice" across the top, and my stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was a letter from my HOA claiming I owed them $250,000 in fines for multiple violations on my own property. They listed everything from my fence color to the placement of my shed, even the fact that my grass was too wild-looking. I couldn't believe it. This was my land, my home, and they were treating me like a trespasser in my own life. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, but when I called their office, the smug voice on the other end told me the board had already voted and there was nothing I could do. They gave me 30 days to pay or face legal action. They spoke. It was like they owned the ground I walked on. Something about that didn't sit right with me. So I decided to dig deeper. I spent nights combing through old property records, dusty deeds, and forgotten maps at the county archives. The more I looked, the stranger it became. The paperwork for the HOA's creation was shaky at best, and the boundaries of the land seemed off. Then, buried in a folder nobody had touched in decades, I found a single page that changed everything. My name wasn't just on the deed for my house, was on a plot that stretched far beyond my backyard. When I traced it out on the map, my hands started to shake. According to the legal description, I wasn't just a homeowner in this neighborhood. I was the legal owner of the entire subdivision. Every street, every lot, even the HOA's own clubhouse on paper. It all belonged to me. The next morning, I walked into the HOA meeting with that document in my hand. Everyone fell silent when they saw it, and that's when I said I laid the paper on the table, right in front of the board president. Her confident smile faded the moment her eyes landed on the county seal. Around the room, board members leaned forward, whispering to each other. Nobody spoke loud enough for the rest of us to hear, but I could see the panic flicker in their eyes. I didn't explain right away. Instead, I told them I'd been doing some research after receiving their letter. I mentioned how strange it was that the HOA bylaws never clearly defined who actually owned the land under the homes. A couple of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The room suddenly felt warmer, the air heavier, as I took a slow breath and tapped the document with my finger. In that moment, I could feel the power shift. For months, they'd treated me like I had no voice, just another name on their list of problem homeowners. Now they were the ones listening. The paper wasn't just an old deed. It was a key to a much bigger story. Over the next few days, I dug deeper into how this HOA even came to be. I learned it had been formed decades ago by a developer who never fully transferred ownership of the land to the homeowners. Somehow, the paperwork had been filed wrong, or maybe not at all. When the developer went bankrupt, the land rights got buried in legal limbo. And now, all these years later, my property purchase had quietly included that missing piece. It explained so much why their fines felt more like intimidation, why certain rules seemed arbitrary, and why they were so quick to shut me down whenever I asked for proof of their authority. But knowing I owned the land was one thing. Proving it, in a way they couldn't ignore, was going to be another battle entirely. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized this fight was just getting started. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I didn't sit down. I wanted them to feel the weight of every second that passed. The board president finally cleared her throat and asked what exactly I thought I was doing. I didn't answer her directly. I just told them I'd found some interesting details in the county's land registry that might explain why their fines didn't exactly hold up in court. A couple of them tried to act unimpressed, but their eyes kept darting to that single sheet of paper like it was a loaded weapon. When I left the meeting, I could feel their stares following me all the way to the parking lot. It wasn't just about the $250,000 anymore. This was about control, and I just threatened the very foundation of theirs. I knew they'd try to push back, maybe even dig up dirt on me. But the more they pushed, the more determined I became. That night, I went back to the old maps I'd found. They showed property lines that didn't match the neighborhood plat the HOA used. Streets, parks, even their beloved tennis courts, all of it was marked inside the boundaries of my deed. The discovery was both thrilling and unsettling. If this was true, it meant the HOA had been charging fees and issuing fines on land they didn't legally own. I started making a list of everything I needed to confirm: tax records, utility easements, even the original sale agreements for each house. The deeper I went, the clearer it became that this wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Somewhere between the maps and the legal documents, I realized something that made my chest tighten. If I was right, then this fight wouldn't just be between me and the HOA. It could turn the entire neighborhood upside down. And once the truth got out, there would be no going back. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, something happened that made my stomach drop. A thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, no return address, just my name printed in block letters. Inside was a stack of photocopied documents, each stamped confidential. At first, I thought it was another scare tactic from the HOA. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized this was something entirely different. The papers detailed a series of private deals between the HOA board members and a real estate investment group. Buried in the fine print were clauses about redevelopment rights and future acquisition, all tied to the very land I'd just discovered I owned. The dates on the contracts were recent, just weeks before they hit me with the $250,000. Fine. It wasn't just about enforcing petty rules anymore. They were planning something much bigger, and my land was at the center of it. That explained their sudden aggression. Okay? If they could force me into bankruptcy or scare me into selling, they could clear the way for whatever project they had lined up. And judging by the size of the proposed budgets, we weren't talking about a small neighborhood upgrades. This was the kind of development that could erase the community as we knew it. The worst part, the documents suggested they'd already started securing permits, quietly slipping them through county offices without the residents ever knowing. If I exposed them, I'd be going up against more than just a stubborn board. I'd be tangling with investors, lawyers, and politicians who had something to gain from keeping me silent. I sat there at my kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of me, feeling the walls close in. This wasn't just my fight anymore, and if I made the wrong move, it could cost me everything. I was still staring at those contracts when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A low voice on the other end said, "You don't know me, but you need to stop digging before it's too late." Then the line went dead. At first, I thought it was just another HOA scare tactic. But when I checked my security camera feed later that night, my blood ran cold. There, at the edge of my driveway, was a car I didn't recognize, idling for nearly 20 minutes before slowly driving away. Whoever it was, they weren't just watching me, they were letting me know they were watching. That's when the real twist hit. I went back to the property documents and cross-referenced the investment group's corporate filings. One of the listed executives wasn't some faceless developer, was the brother of the HOA president. The whole redevelopment plan wasn't just a business move. It was a family operation designed to funnel millions straight into their pockets. My ownership of the land wasn't just inconvenient for them, was the one thing standing in the way of their payday. Suddenly, everything clicked. The $250,000 fine wasn't random. The legal threats weren't overreach, and the shady permits weren't a coincidence. This had been in motion for months, maybe years. And now, with the contracts and ownership records in my hands, I was holding the one thread that could unravel it all. But that also meant I had a target on my back. If they were willing to manipulate the law and use intimidation, what would they do next? I locked my front door, pulled the blinds, and stared at those papers, knowing I was sitting on a secret that could bring the entire neighborhood and its so-called leaders crashing down. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse with a folder under my arm. Inside were the deed proving my ownership, the HOA's bogus fine letters, and the redevelopment contracts linking them to the investment group. I filed an official ownership claim and a petition to halt all permits tied to the neighborhood until the matter was resolved. Within hours, word started to spread. Neighbors knocked on my door, some angry, some shocked, all wanting to know if it was true. That night, the HOA held an emergency meeting. The board president tried to call it a misunderstanding, but when I laid the county's stamped confirmation of my land rights on the table, there was no denying it. Murmurs rippled through the room. People started demanding answers why they'd been paying fees, why they hadn't been told about the redevelopment deal. The president's face went pale, and for the first time, she didn't have anything to say. By the end of the meeting, the HOA's authority had effectively collapsed. The fines were voided, the redevelopment plan frozen, and the board mem